Hi, I'm Traci Bautista, and welcome to the Style Remix campaign with Joanne Fabric and Crafts and featuring I Love to Create products. I am going to share with you today in a series of videos how I created all of these fabulous papers and fabrics that I dyed with one of my favorite I love to create products, the tie-dye kit. And these are super simple to work with. All you do is add water to the bottles, and you can see they come in a bunch of different colors there. And you shake the bottle up and you can get started dyeing fabric, and I actually dye paper towels too. So I'm going to show you how I have created all of these fun pieces with a variety of tulip fabric paints and sprays, and also the tie-dye kit. And actually I used only 3 bottles of the tie-dye kit and a Ziploc bag. So enjoy the videos and have fun using the tulip tie-dye kit. Here's a little setup that I have on my table. I'm going to be playing and experimenting today with the tulip tie-dye kits, and these are super simple to use. You can find them at all the major craft retailers in the fabric paint aisle, and you just add water. And I'm going to be actually doing a fun little project where I am going to over dye some of my painted fabrics, and I've got stacks of remnants here of bits and pieces that I've painted or I've drawn on, or I've just made some random marks, pieces of canvas, big pieces of drill cloth that I've painted, and a lot of times I leave areas that are white or where the canvas shows through, so those would make great pieces to dye. And I have other pieces that I have created to use that have items like gesso or dimensional paint on them. This has some glue, can't see it very well in the picture, but a texture there. You can kind of see that. And I've got white on white quilting fabric, which is awesome to dye. And then I've got a piece of Osnaburg fabric that I have drawn and doodled with Collage Podge over. So you can kind of see the shininess on there where I drew flowers and different doodles. And the Collage Podge will act as a resist when I use the dyes. And then I've got some of my girly glam faces that I drew with permanent pen on the fabric. And then I always have paper towels because I use them to clean my surface and to dye and create some fun colored tie-dyed paper towels. And then I just have bits and remnants of fabrics. Muslin, I use a lot of muslin, drill cloth, any kind of canvas, duck cloth. Most of my projects are not going to be worn, so I'm not too worried about using prepared fabric or washing my fabric. I've also got a selection of vintage and store-bought yarns and fibers. Some of these I found at the thrift store, and I'm going to dye some of those. And then I've got some vintage lace also that I found at antique and thrift stores. So I have a whole stash. I just keep all these little pieces. This is a rag from the hardware store. Gauze, cheesecloth, anything works, old jeans. So I've got all this fun stuff here on my studio table, and we're going to have some fun. And then I have also, I like to use gloves. I use these super large gloves because I don't want anything to get on my clothes or my fingers, especially because it's dye. Normally I paint without gloves, but because it is dye, I use gloves. And for those of you who are really sensitive, using a little mask like that when you're adding the water in to the bottles may be something that some of you want to use. It's not mandatory, but some people are sensitive to the pigments that are in there. It is actual powder, so I just like to wear it while I'm filling the bottles, but it's personal preference. And I used distilled water. You can use regular water from the faucet. I just have that sitting in my studio. So I'm just going to mix up a few colors of dye and show you how I create these fun dyed pieces. So I have a bunch of fabrics here. I thought I'd just show them a little bit closer. I've got this piece, I use gesso. You can also use white paint to create the resist, and I just painted through sequin waste or punchinella. And then here I've drawn with dimensional paint. My favorite is Slick Dimensional Paint by Tulip, and I just draw right on the fabric and let that dry, and you can feel that it has like a little bit of a 3D raised effect. I've got a piece here that I drew on the top with the fabric fusion glue, and it's dry now, so that acts as a resist. So with fabric fusion, that can also be a resist. And then I also have a piece here that is just white on white quilting fabric. So wherever there is white, that will act as a resist also. And then on this piece, I have my Collage Podge that I've put into a little applicator bottle. So this little applicator has a tip on it, and I can draw right on the surface of the fabric. And this is Osnaburg fabric, and it kind of has a linen look, so it's a little bit bigger weave, but it's a really fun fabric to paint. And once it's dry, I can paint right over it or dye it. And then I've got just various fabrics. I've used some fabric sprays and paints on here. This was using rubber bands as a resist. And then doing a few rubbings with various tools from the hardware store and my handmade hot glue stencils. And I've rubbed over the top of this with oil pastels. So I'm going to experiment just over dyeing and tie-dyeing some of these pieces that I drew and painted on. And then I've got other pieces here where I've used acrylic paints and fabric paints and use the Tulip dimensional paints on here and the Tulip soft fabric paints to paint backgrounds and then also to draw the lines. So all of these will make great little pieces to add to art quilts or to my handmade journals. A lot of these become pages in my journals. And then these these were painted also with the dimensional paints. This is a technique in my book. It's transparency monoprints, where I draw with the dimensional paint right onto a transparency and then print it onto the fabric. And then once it dries, it's kind of laying on top of the fabric, so it'll act as a nice resist. It may blend with some of the dye colors, so keep that in mind. And some of these I've used water-based paints, so I'm not sure which ones I used water-based paints or markers, so some of them may mix. But that's kind of the fun of creating pieces like this. I really love over dyeing things that have gesso and other paints. This is a piece of this canvas, which was dyed with one of the tulip colors that I created from the tie-dye kit. And it has dimensional paint, it has fabric acrylic paint on here, and it even has Collage Podge underneath, where you can see there is a little bit of a resist of a kind of a off-white color right there. So you can see how it transformed from this to this. So I really love experimenting, especially with these textures. This is after it's been washed, so I still have a nice texture from the dimensional paint on this piece. So if you have any leftover canvases that are just sitting in your stash, it's a great way to alter them. And you can see I have a lot of white space, open space in a lot of my canvases, so I love to take these and over dye them. And then you can also just dye fabric. This is just muslin that I have drawn with the dye. I made circles and then I over dyed that with another purple color once it dried, and this is after it's been washed. So you can see how vibrant those colors are. And then this was a piece of kind of a jersey cotton fabric that had this pattern on it already. So this was all white before, and I dip dyed it into a few of the tulip tie-dye colors to get this kind of variegated look on this piece. So a lot of these become pieces that I will stitch or use as bindings or in other projects. And I thought I would just show a couple more little pieces so you can see how bright these colors are. They're really, you know, nice and neon. And then I've got just random pieces of fabric that I have in my studio that I really like to use for various projects. So whenever I dye fabric, I usually spend a whole day dyeing the fabric, so because it's a lot, it's a big process. Okay, so I have the Tulip 5-color tie-dye kit, and you can create 20 shirts with this, but I am going to use it for something a little bit different, to dye all of my fabric pieces, remnants there. So I'm just going to open this and cut this open so I can show you what's in here. So you get the 5 colors. The dye, you'll notice, is already inside the bottle, and all you have to do is add water. You fill it to the line here until it's dissolved. And it actually comes with gloves, so you can use these also while you're working. So I'm going to put on these gloves, and because my nails are so long, they usually break the gloves. That's why I use my super duper heavy gloves, my polka dot gloves. So these, to double it up, it's a lot better. And I want to use, for this project, I'm going to use the teal color, and I have my little mask that I'm going to put on. You know, it is personal preference. I'm just going to put this on while I fill in the water. So you're going to just unscrew the cap, and this is not drinking water. It's distilled water, so I'm only using this for the dye purposes. You want to make sure that whenever you're using any kind of dye, just shake that up. Take off that mask now. Anytime you're using the dye, you want to make sure that you have no food around, because you don't want to eat any of this. Also, you want to make sure you don't touch your eyes. It could irritate your eyes. And I just want to check to see at the bottom there, if all of the dye is mixed in. And it's ready to go. I'm gonna move this. Oh, and then it also comes with extra packs of dye, so you can use those for making additional colors, mixing additional colors. And then it comes with the rubber bands. And you can use the rubber bands to tie-dye fabric. This is actually a tote bag, but I just wanted to show you what that package comes with. So there's lots of fun things, and then there's a project guide. So there are a bunch of ideas for you, and it gives you the directions of things you could do. So you could work with strip bunches, you can fold, you can make a sunburst. There are so many different ways. You can freehand, which that's what I like to do. You can put it in spray bottles. And I'm gonna mix up a couple more colors. I'm gonna put my mask back on. Get a little. And you may want to wear an apron while you're doing this. See, I already spilled it. That's why I have paper towels and rags and anything and all this stuff around just to catch all this excess. Okay, I have yellow and green here, and I mean yellow and blue. And I'm going to show you how I mix colors. So I don't really have exact recipes, I just play. Okay, I have a little plastic bin. This I usually use just so I can hold all of my bags here. And the first color I'm going to put in here, let me take off this cover, is the turquoise. So I'm just going to put a little bit in here. And I'm going to leave that there. And you can make the colors lighter by adding a little bit more water. And then you can also mix them. So if I want to have a color that is a little bit more like lime green, I can do that too. And I'm just going to take a little bit of the yellow, put it in the bag, and then mix it with a little bit of the blue, and then see what color I get. So it's kind of more of a lime green. So I really like experimenting and creating my own colors. So you'll see, because I'm only using a little bit of dye at a time. This works well. I just don't want this to fall. Usually I dye in really large bags. There we go. And then if I want to, and I just make sure I clean off my hands in between. And then if I want to put a little bit more blue here, I'm going to add a little bit of water just to make that a lighter color. So the dye will go a long way. Remember, this dilutes it, so it won't be as, it'll be a little bit lighter in color than the other blue that I have here. that's full strength. And then I can make one that's just all yellow. And I can always add more later if I need more dye. So I've got a yellow, a lime green, a lighter blue, and then the regular blue. I'm just going to leave that one over here so I don't forget which one is which. And then I'm just going to take a couple of my fabrics and see what happens. So now I've got a couple of pieces. I'm going to test this on this yellow just to see how this looks. So you can see, just dump the fabric in there, and then what you can do, squeeze all the air out there, and then just kind of push the dye around in the bag. So this is a nice way to not get as messy when you're dyeing your fabric or your and then you can see it's already inside that piece. So it's nice and bright. And I want to squeeze out all the excess dye. And then you can see how it over-dyed the color that was in there. And then if I want to, it's dripping a little bit, so sometimes what I'll do is just squeeze it between a paper towel just to get that excess off. And then if I just wanted to get maybe a little bit of green in there, I could dip just the end, almost like I'm creating an ombre effect. But you want to make sure you just grab a little bit of the color and not get it on the entire piece, and then squeeze that out. So you always want to make sure, if you're going to do this, the colors are going to mix, so you want to start with the lightest and then go to the darkest so that you don't contaminate your colors in the bag. And then so now I can open this up and trying not to get green on the other part of the fabric. So you can see I've got a yellow and green fabric there. And then I can let that dry. So what I like to do is I just put it on top of a paper towel. So I'm going to try this green color on here. This has a resist of dimensional paint and glitter, and this is on muslin. So I'm going to throw that in the bag and just smush it around. And if I don't want to get the whole piece covered with dye, just so I get more of a tie-dyed effect, I can do that. And then keep some of the areas from getting the green color on it. And then now I'm going to take this and toss it into the blue and just grab a little bit of the dye and squeeze it so it mixes on the fabric itself. So everywhere the two colors touch, I'm going to get a mixture of those colors. So you can see here what happens. So you can see I still have some areas that are open with color. And I'm going to leave it like that. I could squeeze a little bit of that color through. And the one thing I love about using the paper towels is now I have a great piece that I can collage with later. So I'm cleaning up all of the dye that's on my gloves. And then I'll save this, let this dry, and I'll have a piece to use later for other artwork. So open this up and then I'll put it on another paper towel and set it aside. So you can see how the blue resisted and it's still shining through under the dye. So I've got a piece with a soft tulip soft paint on it. I'm going to throw it in the lighter color blue. So you can see wherever that purple was, it blended with the blue. And I had some other kind of pink color there, and you could see where it's blended. So I could dip this whole thing again, or I could just leave it so it has some of the area not covered with color, with paint, with dye, I mean. So I think I'm going to do that. You can see how vibrant the colors are. So the pink that's in there, you can see the pink still is shining through really nicely on the fabric. Here I'm going to try a little bit of the green. Take another paper towel, clean up my gloves, and squeeze out the excess dye on here also, and see how this changed. So I really love the white. So you can see where I had the dimensional paint, the white dimensional paint, the black, and then there's more white here. And you can see where that color mixed with the acrylic in the back, but also resisted the dimensional paint. Once I have these pieces still damp, I actually will usually wrap them in plastic wrap or saran wrap, but since I don't have any in my studio, I'm just gonna, until I get home, I'm gonna take it and throw it in a bag, just take all the air out. And you gotta make sure that if you're gonna put pieces in here that to keep them damp, you want to make sure you use the same colors in your bag. You don't want to put a yellow piece in here or it will get dyed green. So just keep that in mind when you're letting these set. It takes 6 to 8 hours. The longer you let it sit, the more intense the colors are. And then you're going to rinse these out completely with warm water. And then what I like to do is I actually like to wash them, and then it gets rid of some of the resist and it makes it a little bit more grungy looking. So I'm just going to let these sit, and then I'll take all the air out of them like that. So it's all about experimenting. I'm going to mix up a couple more colors just so I have some more variety, and then dye some more fabric. But always make sure you wipe off your gloves with a towel so that you don't get dye on anything else. Okay, I've mixed up some of the fuchsia color, and I'm going to put that in its own bag. And I want to make a little bit of this color, and then I'm going to mix it with some of the color that I have here already and change the color. So I don't want to mix it with the green and yellow because I will get brown unless I want brown. I'm going to mix it with the blue here, and I'll get a purple color. So you can see how that changed that to a darker, right now it looks like blue. If I want to put a little bit more, just so I get, maybe I'll do that first. It looks almost like an indigo. And then let's test that out and see what color I get. I'm going to take a piece of muslin. So this just has a little bit of stamping on it. Let's throw this in the bag. I can also, if I want to, I'm just going to do a quick little twist, and I can tie this with rubber bands. Take off my glove really quick just so that I can tie this easier. So the rubber bands will help also act as a resist. You want the rubber bands to be really tight on there. Because it's so small, I'm just twisting the fabric. If I had a large piece of fabric, I would fold it in a fan kind of shape back and forth to get nice creases in there. And we'll just leave it like that. See what happens. So this is very random, the way that I dye stuff. I'm going to throw in some yarn fiber in there, and you can see it's dyeing the color, and it's a nice dark blue. I like that. And maybe I'll grab this other kind of lace color that I have here, and I'm just going to dye the whole thing. The dye is soaking up into the fabric. So you can kind of make your own indigo by mixing the colors. Nice dark blue. You squeeze all that dye into the fabric there, and I'm squeezing it out into the bag so I can show you the color. So it's actually turned more purple. It looked darker, like a darker blue in the bag, but it looks a little bit more purple right now, like a really, really dark, deep purple. It's pretty though. So I'm going to take that and throw it in another Ziploc bag. So you can see what happens with the paper towel there. I'm just squeezing all that excess dye into the paper towel. And I can throw all of this into a bag. And then on this one, I'm going to add a little bit more blue in there, because I don't want it to be so purple. So just add a little bit more blue. Want to put a little bit more color in here. I want to try and use up all of these bottles so that I don't waste any of the dye, because you can't really save it for too long. You can experiment, you could throw it in the refrigerator, but the dye after a while, it's not as strong. Let's try this. It's going to change, it might change that yellow. That's acrylic paint on there, on that fabric. And let's see if it'll resist it. It's always kind of a surprise. I I can also squeeze it onto another piece of fabric to pick up the excess dye. This is a piece of canvas, and I actually had some resist on there so you can see where that color is resisting. I'm going to leave that one there and then see what happened to this. So you can kind of see that yellow, but it turned to a different color. So we'll see what happens when I dry it. So I'm going to throw these in that bag. Keep this nice and wrapped up. And then I'm just going to continue dyeing the fabric. I'm going to actually put this, even though I said not to go backwards, I want to put this in the pink. I'll do that after I dye a few other pieces so that I don't contaminate it too much. See how the white, I just love the white. Get that color. And then here, this was the flowers, and that's really pretty. So you can still see some of that blue and turquoise there. And I think I'm going to leave some of that white area and just let it sit. So now I'm going to put this in a separate bag. And actually, I'm going to dye a couple more in this color, and then I'm just going to throw all these in there. Well, now you can see that drawing that I did, a dimensional paint. Oops. Even though it's not totally dyed, but you can see where the white is there. That's where I drew. So I'm going to leave it like this because I like the way that that looks. And same with these other ones. I'm not going to squeeze it because I want to just leave it kind of like that tie-dyed look. And then this covered most of that. So it's really pretty. So I'm just going to throw these back in here so that they can dry. Well, not dry, but they stay nice and damp inside the bag. Stay tuned for part 2 of the video series. I'll share more color mixing and over dyeing techniques for creating mixed media fabric pieces for art journals and various craft projects. I'll also reveal the final colorful fabrics.
Ooh.